Welcome back to The Deep Dive. If you joined us on our last exploration, we took this massive coast-to-coast road trip across the culinary landscape of the United States.
Yeah, we really covered some ground.
We did. We mapped the diversity, sort of moving past those generic fast food stereotypes to explore the complex regional identity. We talked about the what and the where, from that beautiful, buttery New England clam chowder to the rich complexity of a genuine Creole gumbo.
We definitely covered the surface level of deliciousness, which is, let's be honest, a very enjoyable place to start.
Absolutely.
But today, our mission is, well, it's much more ambitious, I think. We need to go beyond just the description.
Yeah.
We want to dig past that surface layer of taste and texture to get to the absolutely crucial why.
Okay.
Why do these specific dishes exist in these specific places? What are the deep, powerful forces, the history, the economics, the specific limitations of the land, and that fierce human pride that actually define what a culture puts on its plate?
Okay, let's unpack this then. We're moving into the realm of cultural causation, really trying to find the deep roots that feed regional identity. And to do that, we need a framework.
We do.
And we're going to borrow a concept usually reserved for, well, the most refined and specific of agricultural products, French winemaking. We are talking about terroir.
Terroir. It's such an immensely potent concept, isn't it? In the world of wine, it's all about how the physical environment, the specific mineral composition of the soil, the microclimate, the elevation, even the angle of the sun on the hill, how all that shapes the final taste of the grape. It dictates the character of that vintage. It is quite simply the inherent, undeniable taste of a place.
But the moment we zoom out from the vineyard and apply that concept to American food culture as a whole, we realize we're no longer just talking about rain and dirt. The soil. It's different.
It is.
We are talking about the cultural soil.
Yeah, cultural soil. That phrase, I think, perfectly captures the messiness and the potency of this country's food story. This is the unique, often paradoxical blend of non-physical, sociological elements that determine what becomes a widespread staple, what becomes an aspirational delicacy, and frankly, what dies out entirely.
So if we're going to be cultural archaeologists today and really dig into this soil, what are the primary components we're looking for? What's in our samples?
Well, we've identified several interlocking and vital factors. We're looking at the specific waves of immigration that settled a region, the harsh realities of poverty versus the subsequent celebration of plenty. That dynamic is key.
Okay.
Then there's the local geography and its limitations or its bounty, the true physical terroir, if you will, and perhaps the most powerful ingredient of all. That fierce, almost stubborn, highly defensive local pride that turns a mere recipe into a regional flag.
Wow. That means today, we aren't just food tasters or history readers. We are truly excavating. We're digging into that soil to understand the specific economic and social forces that bake centuries of human history into something as seemingly simple as, say, a Maine lobster roll.
Right.
Or stir generations of survival ingenuity into a rich bowl of spicy Louisiana gumbo.
Exactly. And our first layer to excavate, the foundation upon which so much of American regional cuisine is built, is a dynamic that has shaped this country from its very beginning. The push and pull of poverty and plenty.
It is genuinely startling when you start digging into the origins of our most comforting dishes, isn't it?
It really is.
So many of the things we now associate with deep cultural heritage and comfort, the dishes we travel hundreds of miles to eat, were born directly out of severe economic necessity. They are a testament to resourcefulness, to maximizing the absolute utility of what were often the cheapest, most difficult, or even leftover ingredients. This is like a culinary alchemy, but fueled by scarcity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that scarcity equation didn't just affect one or two dishes. It dictated the entire flavor profile of vast regions for generations. Just take the foundation of Southern cooking and soul food.
Okay.
We think immediately of those deep green, flavorful dishes built around collard greens or mustard greens. They are now beloved staples, right? But they earn that status not because they were some kind of leisurely choice.
No, they were chosen because they were the most reliable option under duress. Is that right?
Exactly. They are agricultural survivors. They could grow successfully in poor acidic soil, the kind of overworked earth that wouldn't sustain more delicate crops.
Right.
They were robust enough to survive harsh weather cycles. And crucially, they packed an immense amount of essential nutrients, especially vitamins and calcium, when other more delicate cash crops or luxury items failed or were simply unavailable due to economic constraints. Their selection was entirely dictated by reliability and, well, caloric necessity.
And we see that same principle applied to something as central and simple as grits, which, let's face it, is just coarsely ground corn.
Pretty much.
Yet it became an absolute cornerstone of the Southern diet. Why was that particular staple so pervasive?
Well, grits won the survival lottery because at the time it was the most inexpensive, readily available, calorie-dense staple product. Simple as that. But the process matters too. A lot. We aren't just talking about dry cornmeal here.
Okay.
True grits or hominy involves nixtamalization. That's treating the corn with an alkaline solution, traditionally lye or limestone. And that's incredibly important.
Wait, why is that chemical process so critical to the story of scarcity? I thought it was just about being cheap and filling.
Well, it was cheap and filling, but without nixtamalization, the corn's nutrient profile is actually incomplete. That process, that alkaline treatment, it frees up the vitamin B3, the niacin, that's locked inside the corn. And that prevents the debilitating nutritional deficiency disease known as pellagra. So consuming nixtamalized corn hominy, or grits, wasn't just about filling the stomach. It was literally the difference between life and widespread regional sickness. It ensured nutritional survival.
Wow. That is a detail that completely reframes the dish for me. It wasn't just cheap fuel, it was scientifically necessary fuel. And the preparation, too, that's a marker of status, isn't it? Like the difference between quick grits and stone ground grits, or the debate over water versus milk or butter.
Oh yeah, that debate is absolutely the current reflection of the historical class divide. Quick grits. That's a modern industrial shortcut, fast, easy, cheap.
Right.
Stone ground grits, which retain more of the corn's flavor and texture, and importantly require longer cooking, they represent the connection to traditional agriculture. And the ultimate status symbol, it's the fat and flavor. Cooking with just water is the stark reality of necessity.
The baseline.
The baseline. But cooking with cream, butter, or even a rich stock, that transforms the simple staple into a luxury vehicle for flavor. So yeah, necessity defined a vast swath of the American food scene.
That concept, that necessity is the mother of the highest culinary invention, is perhaps most elegantly expressed in the evolution of classic barbecue, particularly, say, pulled pork in the Carolinas.
Oh, absolutely.
This feels like the ultimate story of turning what was economically undesirable into gold.
It truly is the high art of the alchemic process.
Yeah.
You know, many modern diners see barbecue as a celebration of expensive meat. Historically, it was precisely the opposite.
Really?
Yeah. Barbecue emerged first and foremost as a solution to a massive waste problem for early butchers and farmers. It was pretty much the only way to efficiently deal with the less desirable, tougher parts of the animal that couldn't be profitably sold as chops or steaks or, quickly grilled.
So focusing specifically on pulled pork, we're talking about the pork shoulder, right? Which is muscular and tough.
Exactly. The pork shoulder, or sometimes called the Boston butt, it's magnificent. But it's loaded with dense, tough, connective tissue, mostly collagen. Historically, it was the cheapest, hardest part to deal with. Try cooking that quickly. You get a chewy, dry mess.
Which leads to the secret ingredient that isn't really an ingredient at all.
Yeah.
It's physics and time.
The technique. Low and slow. We are talking hours and hours, often 12 to 18 hours of slow cooking over a very specific low, gentle heat. Typically maintained somewhere between, say, 225 and 250 degrees Fahrenheit. That specific extended heat is the transformer.
What happens chemically in that temperature range? What's the magic?
Well, below 250 degrees, you trigger this amazing process. The tough collagen protein begins to break down, melt, and transform into luscious, tender, mouth-coating gelatin.
Ah, gelatin.
Yeah, and this gelatin lubricates the remaining muscle fibers, making the meat incredibly succulent. It turns an economic liability, a tough, sinewy cut, into an intensely tender, smoky, and delicious masterpiece.
And the regional variation in the sauce, that's also dictated by scarcity and local ingredients, isn't it?
Absolutely. If you look at the different Carolina traditions, the sauces tell the story of the local environment. In eastern North Carolina, the sauce is almost pure vinegar and pepper.
Why vinegar?
Because historically, vinegar was the cheapest, most readily available preservative and flavoring agent in that area. Simple as that. Then you go to South Carolina, closer to Charleston, you see the influence of German immigrants who introduced mustard, leading to those golden mustard-based sauces.
Interesting.
And farther west, you get the heavier tomato sauces, often influenced by access to sugar and processed goods, reflecting a later stage of agricultural and industrial availability. The sauce is literally a map of local economic and ethnic history.
So it starts as an economic constraint, a problem of maximizing the scraps, and is perfected into a high art form that sparks regional warfare today. That completely reframes the concept of comfort food for me.
It does. And we see that very same culinary strategy, that use of alchemy to multiply resources, in Cajun and Creole cuisine too. Dishes like gumbo and jambalaya are perfect examples of what are affectionately and accurately termed stretch dishes.
Stretch dishes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that name tells you pretty much everything about the household economics behind their creation.
They are the pinnacle of culinary strategy, really. They were brilliant strategic ways to take a small, precious amount of expensive protein,
Right.
maybe a few crawfish, a handful of shrimp, bit of precious smoked sausage.
Things with a lot of flavor bang for their buck.
Exactly. And combine it with massive quantities of cheap, filling, readily available staples.
And that involves using the high volume components, rice, and the essential aromatics.
Precisely. You utilize huge quantities of rice, the holy trinity of local vegetables, onions, celery, and bell pepper, and a deep, flavorful stock, often built upon a dark, slow-cooked roux. The entire objective was to stretch those high-value, expensive ingredients to ensure a large, hungry family felt full and deeply satisfied without breaking the budget. It is flavor optimization based on a fixed, low-cost budget.
It's the ultimate example of brilliant culinary engineering driven by the household economy of scarcity. It's amazing.
But here is the central paradox that makes the American cultural soil so fascinating. Existing right alongside that intense ingenuity driven by scarcity, you have the sudden, overwhelming culture of plenty.
The complete opposite side of the historical driver. When does that shift happen, and how does it manifest itself on the plate?
Oh, it manifests dramatically after the mid-20th century. Think about the massive industrial and agricultural changes, especially the post-war boom.
Right.
Look at the classic American diner breakfast that we touched on briefly, those towering stacks of pancakes, the plates piled high with 3 eggs, 6 strips of bacon, and a mountain of home fries.
Yeah, that plate screams celebration and excess, not scarcity.
Exactly. It screams industrial agricultural abundance. It's a food landscape born from a time when having more than enough, more protein, more fat, more calories than necessary for basic subsistence was not just a fleeting dream, but the new, readily achievable normal.
How did that happen?
Well, government subsidies made things like corn and dairy incredibly cheap, and new transportation methods meant fresh produce and meat were available pretty much everywhere, year-round. The focus shifted from survival to, well, conspicuous consumption. The portion size itself became a marker of the nation's wealth.
So we have these two parallel historical drivers, the ingenuity of making the absolute most of a little, which created our heritage dishes, and the joyful expectation of having a whole lot, which defined the 20th century standard. They are constantly in conversation, shaping the American palate.
Constantly. And that dynamic, that push and pull of necessity and luxury, leads us directly into our second and arguably most defining element of America's cultural soil: immigration waves and adaptation.
Okay, this is where we see human stories directly colliding with economic realities. And I think the critical distinction here, the part we often miss, is that immigrant food in the U.S. was never simply copied and pasted verbatim from the old country.
No, definitely not. It was adapted. And often dramatically so. It wasn't just because a specific spice wasn't available, though that happened too. The adaptation was often driven by something far more powerful: newfound economic stability, or maybe access to ingredients that were previously unobtainable luxuries back home.
And there is no finer, more symbolic monument to this transformation than the ultimate Italian-American dish, spaghetti and meatballs.
Oh yeah, it is everywhere now. But if you trace its roots, the American version is fundamentally a dish of economic declaration. You would struggle mightily to find that specific dish served in that exact, abundant, meat-heavy way in most traditional regional homes in Italy,
Really?
especially those in the poorer South where many American immigrants originated.
Why is the traditional approach so different over there?
Because meat was precious. In Italy, traditionally, polpette meatballs, they're small, often reserved for holidays, perhaps made primarily of veal or pork, and they're usually served as their own separate course, the secondo.
Ah,
The pasta sauces, the primo, were typically much lighter, simpler, often just tomato and basil, or maybe a quick cook and ragu. They rarely featured a giant piece of meat sitting directly on top.
so when Italian immigrants arrived, they encountered a different market reality, a meat reality.
A completely transformed reality. When Italian immigrants arrived in urban centers in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, they suddenly had access to cheap, plentiful meat, specifically large amounts of beef and pork. Back home, beef in particular was often unaffordable, an extreme luxury.
So the availability of affordable, high-quality protein redefined the dish instantly and aggressively.
It redefined it as a statement. Putting a huge, rich meatball made of a mix of beef and pork, often the size of your fist, right on top of the pasta wasn't just a new recipe. It was a potent, visible, and abundant declaration of having achieved a piece of the American dream.
Wow.
We have so much wealth now, the dish implicitly stated, that we can put the secondo, the meat, right on top of the primo, the pasta, and eat them together. It was showing off, basically.
But wait, if the goal was to showcase wealth, why did the ingredients shift toward using industrial products? Like the reliance on widely available canned tomatoes, for instance. That seems to undercut the idea of aspirational luxury, doesn't it?
That's a brilliant point, and it perfectly illustrates the compromise inherent in the cultural soil. While the meat symbolized prosperity, the sauce symbolized survival and adaptation to the constraints of the new industrial world. Canned tomatoes offered consistency and availability year-round, which was essential for restaurant survival and for immigrant families working long hours. They couldn't rely on garden-fresh produce like back home.
So it's a hybrid dish. Aspirational meat meets pragmatic industrial sauce base. That makes sense.
Exactly. And the final step of adaptation was the flavor profile. The addition of sugar to the sauce, often used in large quantities compared to traditional Italian sauces, was a conscious adaptation to the general American palate.
Which preferred things sweeter.
Yeah, which preferred a sweeter, richer flavor profile than the drier, more savory Italian originals. It was adaptation for market acceptance, pure and simple.
That is a powerful story. Aspiration, economics, adjustment, all served right on a plate. But the motivations behind adaptation aren't always about celebrating prosperity, are they? Sometimes they're about sheer business necessity and survival in a hostile new market.
Definitely.
Which brings us to the rise of Chinese American food, specifically the legendary, slightly mysterious chop suey.
Chop suey.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating, almost mythic culinary creation, isn't it? For decades, it was the quintessential Chinese dish for most Americans. Yet it bears minimal resemblance to the traditional regional cuisines found in China. It is a true American invention.
And its creation is often tied to a specific, challenging historical period for Chinese immigrants.
Precisely. Its origin stories are manifold. You hear lots of things. The popular myth suggests it was created by diplomats in New York trying to placate hungry American officials. Kind of a nice story.
Right.
But the more likely, and I think more powerful story, ties its origin directly to Chinese cooks needing to cater to a very specific, resource-constrained, and non-Chinese clientele during massive infrastructure projects like the railroad boom in the late 19th century.
So the driving force wasn't about status, like the meatball. It was about market capture and survival, especially important given the severe restrictions of like the Chinese Exclusion Act, period.
It was an existential business invention.
Okay.
Chinese cooks needed a dish that could tick 3 non-negotiable boxes for the Western workers they were serving. It had to be fast to prepare, cheap to produce with local ingredients.
Yeah.
And it had to appeal to an unfamiliar American palate that was, frankly, wary of anything too genuinely intense or genuinely exotic. They had to simplify, dilute, and Americanize to survive economically.
And chop suey delivered perfectly on those economic and social constraints. It hit all the marks.
It was brilliant in its own way. The dish relies heavily on ingredients that were readily available and affordable in the Western American market at the time. Things like celery, onions, and bean sprouts.
Common stuff.
Common, quick cooking, cheap, and voluminous. They were quickly stir-fried with small, almost token amounts of meat and bound in a mild, thick, often brown sauce that satisfied the American expectation of having gravy over their food.
The genius then wasn't really culinary complexity, but business model ingenuity. Is that fair?
Completely. Chop suey was fast, replicable, and highly profitable due to its low-cost inputs. It allowed Chinese restaurants to survive and thrive by offering a standardized, non-threatening version of exotic food. It became the template for an entire genre of Chinese-American cuisine dishes invented in America for an American palate and used as a cultural bridge to maintain an economic foothold during periods of intense racial hostility.
It's incredible how both the aspirational dish, spaghetti and meatballs, and the entrepreneurial dish, chop suey, were invented or dramatically reinvented in America, becoming key parts of the American food narrative, entirely dependent on that cultural soil.
It confirms that the economic realities, the geography, the political atmosphere, they shape the final dish more fundamentally than any cultural tradition simply imported from the old country. The American story is one of adaptation and reinvention again and again.
These incredible stories of culinary adaptation lead us naturally to our third and final layer of the cultural soil, the point where food stops being just a meal and starts becoming a required, defended symbol. We're talking about regional identity and fierce local pride.
Yes. This is where the local specialty transcends mere preference and becomes almost tribal in its importance. It's not just a preferred flavor, it is a compulsory symbol of belonging. It acts as a test of local literacy, and there is an understood ritual that must be performed to be accepted.
And you mentioned the classic example of cultural initiation, the ordering process for the Philadelphia cheesesteak. It's not just food, it's performance art, right?
It is practically a secret handshake, delivered at high speed, often through a small window. The difference between ordering correctly and ordering like an ignorant tourist is immediate and obvious to the person behind the counter. They know.
Right. If you walk into Pat's or Gino's in South Philly and confidently order a cheesesteak Whit Whiz, you are performing an act of local culture. You're signaling you know the rules, what kind of cheese, that you want onions, and how to say it efficiently.
Exactly. And that choice of Cheese Whiz, which outsiders often scoff at as just some processed industrial product,
Guilty as charged sometimes.
well, it actually has a deep functional history that ties directly back to Philly's working class, no-nonsense attitude.
Wait, how can a processed cheese spread invented in a lab be a symbol of cultural pride tied to terroir? That seems like a stretch.
Because its function is perfect for the specific requirements of the dish. A cheesesteak operation is all about volume, speed, and consistency.
Okay.
Cheese Whiz melts at an ideal low temperature, offering consistent, complete coverage of the chopped steak and locking it all together into a cohesive package. You don't have to wait for slices to soften or melt in awkward chunks. It just works.
Ah, efficiency.
It embodies the city's need for efficiency and its bustling, working-class pace. Ordering at Whit Whiz is badge of honor, a small signal that says, I understand the local language and the need for speed.
That is a fantastic defense of a much maligned ingredient. It's an ingredient of function, not refinement. I get that.
Exactly. And while the cheesesteak is a relatively modern urban identity statement, New Mexico takes this idea of food as a regional flag and makes it officially state-sanctioned, tying it to literally 400 years of agricultural history.
You're talking about the official state question, red or green, referring to the chili sauce.
It is the foundation of New Mexico identity. This is not a casual preference, it's a foundational civic statement. The roots of the state's culinary heritage are incredibly deep, representing a direct, continuous culinary link that combines Native American and Hispanic agricultural and cooking practices, stretching back over 4 centuries.
Let's detail the difference between the two colors, because for an outsider, it might just seem like a color choice, but they represent two vastly different flavor profiles, right?
Oh, they absolutely do. The green chili is the chili in its fresh, early stage, usually roasted over fire. It's bright, savory, vegetal, and often quite sharp. It's the flavor of the late summer harvest.
Okay.
The red chili, conversely, is the fully ripened chili that has been dried. It's sweet, earthy, deeply savory, and sometimes smoky. It's the flavor of preservation of winter stores. Debating which is superior, red, green, or Christmas, which is both, is a fundamental local pastime. They take it seriously.
And the economic significance mirrors the cultural depth, I assume.
Entirely. These hatch towels are not just a local crop. They are a locally protected commodity, the cornerstone of the state's agricultural economy. When locals ask red or green, they are literally tasting their shared heritage and participating in a continuous 400-year-old agricultural and culinary tradition. It ties the current economy, the past culture, and the very identity of the people all into one potent question.
And if we look at other regional icons, the connection between physical geography, economic industry, and cultural identity is inescapable. The physical terroir provides the building blocks for that pride.
It generalizes perfectly across the country. The iconic Maine lobster roll exists because of the cold, specific waters of the Gulf of Maine, which provide the ideal habitat for the lobster industry. That geography makes it possible.
Right.
The culinary identity of the Pacific Northwest, conversely, revolves heavily around salmon and other seafood because of the specific geography of its powerful rivers, which allow for spawning runs, and the cold, nutrient-rich Pacific Ocean currents.
So these regional foods become a delicious, tangible form of civic pride. You're allowing people to literally taste a region's economic history, its geographical limitations, and its very sense of self. It's the ultimate synthesis of all the layers we've discussed.
It is the blueprint, really. We have dug through these 3 critical layers. Yeah. The dynamic push of poverty versus the pull of plenty. Mm-hmm. The incredible story of immigrant adaptation as an expression of prosperity or sometimes necessity.
Yeah.
And finally, the power of food as a regional, fiercely protected flag.
And understanding that whole process gives so much more meaning and weight to something as simple as a diner plate or a paper wrap sandwich. Every meal is truly a portal into history, sociology, economics. It's kind of mind-blowing.
It really is. So for our listeners, let's maybe synthesize everything we've covered and move toward practical application.
Yeah.
We've built this robust framework for understanding the why. Now, perhaps we should present a practical, maybe a 3-part curriculum for anyone who wants to truly engage with American food, not just as a consumer, but as a legitimate field of study.
A syllabus for the aspiring cultural archaeologist. I love it. Okay, what's the introductory course? Where do we start our journey? Course 101.
Course 101. The classics, done right, the fundamentals. The goal here is mastery of the fundamentals and establishing a baseline. Before you can truly appreciate the complex variations in the modern fusion dishes, you must experience the iconic dishes in their purest, most archetypal form, delivered with uncompromising quality.
Okay, so we need to set the standard, understand this platonic ideal of the dish before we see its variations. Get the foundation right.
Exactly. Don't just eat any burger. Find a classic no-frills diner, the kind of stainless steel and maybe chipped formica, where the seasoned flat-top grill is effectively a key ingredient itself, imparting decades of flavor into the simple patty.
Right.
Don't just eat a store-bought pie. Find a homemade apple pie from a specific farm stand in autumn, made with local fruit and a crust built on technique and maybe local dairy. Focus on understanding the foundational, essential quality of the food before any modernization or fusion takes place. That foundation tells you what the cultural baseline was.
That requires slowing down and appreciating quality over convenience. That makes sense. Establish the foundation. So what about the intermediate level? Course 201. Where do we go next?
Course 201. The regional deep dive. Depth over breadth. This is where we stop generalizing and start specializing. The goal is complete immersion in cultural context. You are moving from a survey course to, well, almost ethnography.
How does the listener achieve that kind of deep immersion? What are the instructions for this course?
Pick one highly distinctive food region, say New Orleans or the Texas borderlands, maybe the Chesapeake Bay oyster territory, and commit to going deep. Don't just try one dish. If you pick New Orleans, try gumbo from 3 different places. 1 Creole, 1 Cajun, and 1 modern version.
Notice the differences.
Yes. Notice the differences in the roux, the spice level, the specific proteins used. Then read the local history of the area to understand why rice and seafood are staples there. And most importantly, talk to people who grew up eating that specific food.
Ah, okay. Asking locals about how their grandmother made the dish, or what they think about the newcomer's version down the street.
Precisely. That's where the real connective tissue comes to life. Learning the story, the ritual, the debate behind the dish transforms it from just a transaction into a powerful cultural experience. You must go beyond tasting the food. You have to absorb its complete context, the way it's prepared, served, and how the community debates and defends its sanctity.
That sounds like a delicious research project, actually. And finally, the advanced class. Course 301, the frontier. What's happening now?
Course 301, the modern fusion, evolution in real time. The goal here is to observe the cultural soil actively evolving in the current moment. This is the cutting edge, the next chapter in American food history, where new adaptations are being forged right now as we speak.
So we're looking for evidence that the historical pattern of adaptation, driven by new immigration, new economic realities, new ingredients, is still active and creating new cultural flags today.
Absolutely. Seek out the current generation of chefs and cooks who are continuing this pattern of adaptation. Find the Korean-American chef in Los Angeles who's making kimchi quesadillas.
Okay, interesting example.
That chef is combining 2 strong cultural flags, the Korean culinary tradition and the Mexican influence of Southern California, using readily available ingredients to forge a new regional identity right there. Or look for the Indian-American chef in New York creating a pizza topped with pica masala sauce.
That's fascinating, because in these modern fusion dishes, we are seeing the same principles at play. Taking the readily available staples, pizza crust, tortilla, and adapting them with the flavors of a new home culture, reflecting current immigration patterns and ingredient availability. It's the same process, just with new players.
These modern hybrid dishes are the new edible symbols of adaptation. They prove that the history we just discussed isn't dusty. It's a living, vital process being written every single day in kitchens and food trucks across the country. It shows that the American food story is fundamentally one of constant dynamic reinvention. It never stops.
What an incredible synthesis. It truly drives home the point that every single meal tells a comprehensive story, connecting the diner directly to history, to economics, to human struggle, and ultimately to celebration. You realize you're not just eating calories, you're engaging with culture. It's profound, really.
It is the soul of the country, served right on a plate. Couldn't say it better.
So we want to leave you, our listener, with a challenge derived directly from this deep dive. Next time you sit down to eat, pick one common food you already love. It could be tacos, pizza, or even the most simple hot dog, and commit to doing just a little research into its cultural soil.
Yeah, ask yourself those foundational questions we talked about. What is the hidden story of poverty or plenty behind this dish? Did it emerge from necessity or from abundance? What is the core immigrant adaptation story that made it American? What compromises were made and what new symbols were created? And how did it eventually become a flag for a certain place or people?
Bring that curiosity, that archaeological mindset to your next meal. You might be genuinely surprised by the depth of history and the power of human ingenuity you find underneath the sauce or inside the bun.
A perfect challenge. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the complex, messy, fascinating cultural soil of American cuisine. We hope it's given you a new appreciation for the incredible stories that our food can tell.
Until next time, stay curious, keep digging for the why, and definitely eat well.